Hello, 7th and 8th grade literature. We are continuing on today with some poetry. We are learning about diction. Diction is choosing the appropriate words and phrases so that the poet or the writer can say exactly what they mean to say. We choose our words wisely, and it's no different in literature, of course. It's even more so, I would think, in literature. And today we're going to be discussing 3 poems by Robert Browning. The first one is called Song from Pippa Passes. Now, just a reminder of who Robert Browning was. At the very beginning of the year, the very first poem that you learned at the beginning of the year was written by his wife, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. The two of them had established a relationship of words. They had written to each other because he was a fanboy of hers. She was a published author. She was writing poetry for newspapers and magazines. She was an invalid, meaning she couldn't really leave her home because of an illness that she thought she had. It turned out some of that was because her father was really abusive to her and had her convinced that she was an invalid, and she actually was fairly healthy. But Robert, reading her poetry, kind of started to fall in love with her for her words, and then started to write to her, and she started writing back, and the two of them eventually met. And then he decided he really wanted to marry Elizabeth, and Elizabeth really wanted to marry him. The problem was Elizabeth's father did not want any of his children to get married because he didn't want them to leave him. He was a very selfish, abusive kind of person, and also probably had a little bit of a mental disorder due to a break after the death of his wife. But Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning ended up eloping and then moving from England to Italy, where they lived out the rest of their married lives fairly happily. Robert Browning was not the most famous of this couple at the time that they were both alive and married. Elizabeth Barrett Browning was much more famous than he was at the time. But then after her passing, and even after his passing, his poetry ended up becoming much more famous than his wife's. But we're going to talk about 3 poems from him today. The first one, Song from Pippa Passes. It's an excellent example of the condensed nature of poetry. This poem is very short. It presents a complete picture of contentment in the early spring morning. So we're going to go through it. It's fairly easy to understand, so it's not going to take us a long time to get through this poem at all. So we may have kind of a short lecture today because his poems, even though I'm going to be explaining them, are very, very short. So let's start with Song from Pippa Passes. And a pass is a space between a mountain. You know this because we live in a pass. We live in the San Gorgonio Pass. We live in the passes between the San Gorgonio Mountains and the mountain range. Okay. The year's at the spring, and the days at the morn. Mornings at 7, the hillsides dew pearled. The lark's on the wing, the snail's on the thorn. God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. It's pretty, but it has some extra layers to it that we're going to start to unravel here. The years at the spring. When we talk in poetry or literature about times of year or seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter, it can also be replayed to the time of day or the time in a person's life. So in this case, it is the position of the year. The year is at the spring, which means it is the new part of the year. The year's at the spring. It's time for spring to happen. It's the rebirth of everything. When we think about spring, which is actually my favorite season, we think about things blooming, the beautiful smell of flowers in the air. I love that so much. The clear skies, the mountains covered in green grass. It's so beautiful, especially in our area in the spring. So it's talking about the years at the spring. But if it was talking about a person being in the spring, it would be talking about childhood. So using the word spring, even though he's literally talking about spring, it also brings into mind all of this extra information about how spring is about newness, about rebirth, about birth. It's about the youth. Okay, so let's go to the next part. The days at the morn. So the day, it's first thing in the morning. Morning. Okay, also can be used to describe someone's life. The morning of someone's life is their very young youth. Okay, mornings at 7. So this gives you the impression that the sun is not quite getting up really early like it does in the middle of summer. I like summer. I mean, well, okay, I love summer, but I don't sleep well in the summer. The light stays very light very very late, and I have a hard time adjusting to that. So I tend to go to bed really really late, and then the sun comes up really early in the morning, and I end up only getting like 6 or 7 hours of sleep a night, which I really need more than that. And then I'll crash after about 5 days, and then I'm out. But I have a hard time adjusting to that. But here we have spring. The sun is coming up and is actually fully up at 7. So that's a nice time for the sun to come up. The hillsides dew pearled. Again, we're looking at the beginning of the day when there's still dew on the grass. We don't see a whole lot of dew in Southern California, but when it's really humid out or it's kind of cool out, we definitely see the dew that has condensed from the air molecules, the water molecules in the air. That's what I'm trying to say. The larks on the wing. One of the things I love when I first wake up in the morning is the fact that the birds are so excited that it's daytime and they're just, talking and singing to each other. Usually they're saying, "Stay away from my nest, you butthead." But, it's still pleasant to hear. So the larks on the wing, the idea of birds flying around first thing in the morning, they're getting food for the day, but they're beautiful to watch. They're beautiful to listen to. And then the snails on the thorn. I used to live in a place in an apartment building where I'd walk around every morning and there were snails everywhere. For some reason, they love first thing in the morning. I think because it's cool and dewy and, they kind of depend on that because their snail tracks, kind of need to slide on that. They're disgusting. I don't like snails. They eat stuff in the garden, so I don't like them. But the snail is on the thorn. It's out early and it's getting whatever nourishment it can. And then we have the next one. God's in his heaven. God is always in his heaven, but he's also in us. He's with us. He's around us. He's everywhere. But this is saying God's in his heaven. In other words, God is in his perfect place, because everything he's mentioning here is about a perfect moment in the morning. How do I know that? Because of the last line. All's right with the world. It's a moment of pure contentment in early spring, in the morning. This idea that you are happy, you are content. It's a moment where you can just feel stress-free and happy about life. Okay, like I said, it's pretty straightforward, and I hope the little explanation helped you, but let's read it through one more time. Here we go. Song from Pippa Passes. The years at the spring, and the days at the morn, mornings at 7, the hillsides dew pearled, the larks on his wing, the snails on the thorn. God's in his heaven. All's right with the world. Okay, go ahead and look at your homework when we're done with this lecture and get it done while it's still fresh in your brain about what this poem is about and what I'm looking for. And read everything in your book that deals with the poetry, because sometimes I ask questions that are from the extra material I put in the book. You need to read the extra material too, not just the poems and not just listening to the lectures. I leave some stuff out on purpose because I want you to get into the habit of learning on your own. Okay, now one of my favorite poems of his, it's called Meeting at Night. Browning uses sights and sounds in the natural world. We're going to talk a little bit of onomatopoeia, which is a sound. It's a word that the actual name of the word is the sound. Like, for instance, when a dog barks, the word bark sounds like a bark. Bark. Okay? Same way with bow wow. Some dogs may have that bow wow sound. Same way with cat. When the cat says meow, it sounds like a meow. That's an onomatopoeia. It's when a word imitates the sound it makes. Cool, huh? Okay, in this one, we're going to have a word that's scratch. And scratch sounds just like something scratching onto another surface. Okay, so listen for that, but we're going to hear a lot of onomatopoeia in this poem. Now, he's going to use sights and sounds of the natural world to help him tell the story of two lovers meeting at night. See the poem's title, Meeting at Night. Again, this is a short poem. It's a complete story. It's a story of a man on a quest to see the woman he loves, and it's really pretty. So let's go through it 3 times. The gray sea and the long black land and the yellow moon half large. I'm sorry. Let me start over again because I messed that up. Meeting at night. The gray sea and the long black land and the yellow half moon large and low, and the startled little waves that leap in the fiery ringlets from their sleep, as I gain the cove with pushing prow, and quench its speed in the slushy sand. Then a mile of warm sea-scented beach, 3 fields to cross till a farm appears, a tap at the pane, the quick sharp scratch, a blue spurt of a lighted match, and a voice less loud, though its joys and fears, than the 2 hearts beating each to each. So pretty. Okay, let's go through it. The gray sea and the long black land. We know this is meeting at night. So if you look at the picture that I've provided for you, it's a perfect representation of what it would look like in the nighttime. You've got the grays of the water and the sky, and then the deep black of the foliage on the shore. It's very cool. And the yellow half moon, large and low. So there is light. It's just, this yellow half moon. And the startled little waves that leap in the fiery ringlets from their sleep. This is the idea that he is in a boat and he is pushing along. And as he's in the boat, he's making ripples, and those ripples are ringing him. If you've ever thrown a rock into a body of water and you notice that the ripples work their way outward, and because the moon is shining on those ripples, it's making them look like they're fiery ripples because the light is catching them just perfectly. So it's the startled little waves are leaping because there's no one else on the lake. It's very placid, and there's just the startled little ringlets. Now, going on, as I gain the cove, that means he's getting closer to shore and closer to a place on shore where he can park his boat. So as I gain the cove with pushing prow, the prow is the front part of a ship or a boat. Okay, so he is pushing his boat through there, but it's not just the pushing prow. He is giving us some language that's going to get us into the moment he is trying to present us with. He's trying to bring us to this scene. So picture him as he's gaining that cove. He's trying to get to the shore and he's pushing that prow. He's moving as fast as he can. And quench its speed in the slushy sand. Remember, I told you to look for onomatopoeias? Slushy is definitely an onomatopoeia. If you've ever got an icy or a slushy out of a machine, like at 7-Eleven, and it makes that sound when you're pouring it into the cup, that's a slushy sound. If you've ever walked in half melted snow, you hear that slushy sound. It sounds exactly like the word slush. Okay? So he's going to quench its speed in the slushy sand. Then, okay, so he's done on the water, and then he's going into the next part of his trip here. Then a mile of warm, sea-scented beach. It's still early enough in the evening where even though it's dark, it's still warm, which means it's really early in the evening, because if you've ever been at the beach and the sun goes down, you notice that the beach gets cold almost immediately because the sand itself is not a good conductor of heat. So he is early in the evening. It's a mile of warm sea-scented beach. He can smell the sea next to him as he's running along this beach. And then he has to cross 3 fields. So this is a long trip to get to the woman he loves. 3 fields to cross till a farm appears. Okay? So he runs a mile on the beach after rowing a boat, and now he is crossing 3 fields, and then he finally sees the farm where she's at. And then another onomatopoeia, a tap. And when we think about a tap sounds like tap, 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 okay? So tap is another onomatopoeia. A tap at the pane. Pane, spelled like this, is a window pane. Okay? The quick, sharp scratch. The quick, sharp scratch. Scratch is an onomatopoeia. It sounds exactly like the sound a scratch makes when you are lighting a match. And that's exactly what he's talking about. There's a tap at the pane. That's him tapping at the pane. And inside there's a quick, sharp scratch, a blue spurt. Spurt is also an onomatopoeia of a lighted match. So here, when you think about a match being lit, you've got the scratch sound and then the psh, spurt sound. Okay. And then there's no onomatopoeia. And a voice less loud, though its joys and fears, than the 2 hearts beating each to each. And then suddenly the poem goes silent. There is no sound at this point. It is 2 hearts beating each to each, which means they are in an embrace and their chests are touching each other because their hearts are beating each to each. They don't need to say anything at this point because they're just welcoming each other home. Okay? So another thing that's really interesting, and I didn't know this until the last time I taught this, and I was doing a little extra research because I'm constantly learning, and you should be too, was Meeting at Night has another little key element to it that I wasn't aware of in all the years I was teaching it, and I love it so much, and I can't wait to share it with you. When we start at the beginning of the poem, everything seems elongated. He's using longer words, and he's creating a longer sense of time. Then, as he gets closer and closer to the farmhouse, the words get shorter and choppier. They basically show him running and trying to get to the farmhouse as quickly as possible. The closer he gets to his destination, the faster he goes until he gets to the destination, and then everything stops. Isn't that cool? I mean, that is genius. It's brilliant. Okay, so let's do it one more time. Meeting at Night. Now that we know everything that this poem means, we can go into it and just really enjoy it the way it's been written. Here we go. Meeting at Night. The gray sea and the long black land, and the yellow half moon large and low, and the startled little waves that leap in the fiery ringlets from their sleep, as I gain with the cove with pushing prow, and quench its speed in the slushy sand, then a mile of warm sea-scented beach, 3 fields to cross till a farm appears, a tap at the pane, the quick, sharp scratch, the blue spurt of a lighted match, and a voice less loud, though its joys and fears, than the 2 hearts beating each to each. So pretty. Okay, we have one more by Mr. Browning, and it is the companion piece to this poem. Now, these 2 poems are often displayed together in textbooks or in poetry books, but they both stand alone. You could read just one of these poems and be great, but they're often presented together because they're companions. They go together, even though they stand alone. So here is the companion piece. We have Meeting at Night, and now we have Parting at Morning. Here we go. So it says here in the extra information, this poem is a companion piece to Meeting at Night. The man who's traveled miles the night before to see his loved one must now return to the real world of men and careers and responsibilities, leaving behind the natural beauty of the sea and the sunrise. So here he has traveled so far to get to the woman he loves, but when it's time for the sun to come up the next morning, he has to get back to the real world and get back to work. Okay, so here we have Parting at Morning. Round the cape of a sudden came the sea, and the sun looked over the mountain's rim, and straight was a path of gold for him, and the need of a world of men for me. Short, sweet, to the point. Let's take it apart. Round the Cape. The Cape is like a little jutting out of rock and sand on a beach. So if you've ever gone to the beach and you've seen like a piece of cliff, like kind of cutting the beach in half, that's the Cape. The idea that he is walking, garbage truck just went by, he is walking on the beach and then he has to divert his path to go around this outcropping. That's the Cape. So round the Cape of a sudden came the sea. So he is walking, he goes around, and then he can see the sea. So he's probably like on an estuary or something, and he sees the sea coming around that Cape. And the sun looked over the mountain's rim. So you think about the sun when it first rises in the morning and it's just coming up over the mountain. So it's already light out, but he hasn't seen the sun yet because he hasn't quite gotten to the place where he's near the mountain. The mountain's in the way of the sun. So the sun is coming up over the mountain. Now, when he talks about the sun being hid by the mountain and now all of a sudden he can see the sun, the sun has a straight path on the water. The picture I included in your book, when I designed this book a couple of years ago, it was when coloring books were like all the rage. And I noticed that a lot of my students were coloring in their books anyway. So I put some coloring pages in the poetry book, and this is one of the coloring pages. And it was perfect because you can see there is the sun that has just risen. And then in the little squigglies in the water, that would be the light of the sun reflecting on the water. When we think about the sun or the moon reflecting on the water, there's usually a straight path or a straight-ish path. And for the sun, it's a path of gold. It's something beautiful. And he can look at this. The man who's walking back to the real world can look at this and go, oh, it's so pretty. Look at this path of gold for the sun. But for himself, it's not as pleasant. I mean, it's still pleasant, but not as pleasant as being with a woman he loves. He has to continue his path to go to the real world. He says, there is a need of a world of men for me. The world of men, in this case, being a job, a career that he has to be a part of. Okay, now that we've taken it apart, let's read it one last time, and then we're going to be finished today a little bit early, and that's okay because I want you guys to take your time. And hey, if you really want to, color this page. Get some gel pens or some colored pencils and go to it. So parting at morning. Round the cape of a sudden came the sea, and the sun looked over the mountain's rim, and straight was a path of gold for him, and the need of a world of men for me. Okay, that's it. You have homework to complete for these 3 poems by Robert Browning. You've got some coloring to do if you so choose. Don't forget to work on a little bit at a time. I never want you to feel like you're pressured to get all your homework done at once. I want you to take your time and really think about what you're writing. And also, please let me please remind you, part of poetry is critical thinking skills, which means you have to think about the answers you choose. I tend to give you at least 3 different answers to choose from. Sometimes all 3 answers are correct. Sometimes it's just 2 answers are correct. Sometimes it's just 1. It is your responsibility to read each and every answer before you choose which one is the right one for this poem. So I need you to take your time and read every one. Don't, please stop doing this whole thing where you just read the first answer and say, hey, that's correct, and filling in A and then just skipping reading B and C, because some of you are not getting the best grades because you refuse to read all of the choices. You need to get into that habit. Not just for me, but this is going to be a life skill for you to get the full information, the complete information. You need to read every part of it and apply it to what you already know. Okay, now I'm done nagging you, and I will talk to you later. We will have our next literature class on Tuesday. See you then. Bye.